You're smoking, it's anyone's business, and it shouldn't be. I mean, in our view, basically, this goes back to the non-aggression principle. You know, basically, if you're not hurting anyone, why is the government trying to regulate your actions? First thing, I mean, there's like a whole reason, like, obviously, like, the reason the guy legalized in the first place was racial, but, you know, like, at the same time, it's like, it's kind of like, for me, you know, one of those outdated things, you know, for example, like the Cuba embargo, you know, like, why do we still have that? Like, why should it matter? You know, for me, like, you know, drug prohibition's a similar type of thing. It's all like, okay, I understand we were racist back in the 40s, so we decided to pass these laws against, you know, like minorities, but why do we still have them now?
Well, and people don't realize that it's like literally all of the prohibition laws are racist. Like the alcohol prohibition was against, I think it was the Irish and Italian immigrants. And
this was originally against the Mexican, like,
yeah, it was called, I mean, that's why it was called the Marijuana Act. It's not legal, it's not marijuana, it's cannabis. Like, marijuana is Spanish.
Mary Jane.
Propaganda name for it.
Right, exactly, and it's like no one would have voted for it if they called it cannabis, because all the white men in Congress at that time
they grew
smoked,
cannabis,
like,
yeah.
You know?
And apart from that, I mean, and then, like, one of the other many beefs I have with it is just the fact that, like, for example, with alcohol prohibition, we did an amendment, right? I mean, not that I agree with alcohol prohibition, but at least we could reverse the amendment whenever we wanted to. I'm like, this executive order, right, passed on by Nixon, made worse by Reagan, made even worse now by Obama, because he's, like, arrested more people for marijuana than, than all presidents.
There have been more drug raids under Obama than anyone else.
Yeah.
Which is funny because he admits to having smoked marijuana, so I don't really know. I don't really get it.
Clinton too.
A little bit special.
Like, I don't really understand. And I mean, what's funny is I was reading an article by someone who I think they're like they study drugs or whatever, they're like an expert. And they were like, my advice for you is if you don't want to be arrested for, you know, doing drugs, my advice to you is to be white. Because literally, like, most marijuana smokers are white, most people in jail are black. Like, there are more black men in jail than are at home with their families or something like that. Like,
1 to 3. It's over 25% of the American population.
Like, that's why there's so many, like, single black women, because, like, all of the, like, I don't know, if you're black, like, you're basically screwed because the cops don't like you. And in court, you're just not treated the same way.
I don't remember the exact statistic, but I wanted to give like a modern example. The penalty for having crack cocaine is like
it's 3 times as bad as having powder cocaine.
Yeah, and crack cocaine is commonly used by I don't want to say just black people, but by non-black people.
That's actually why
powder cocaine is considered like the rich man's drug.
Yeah, well, they originally had powder cocaine, and they invented crack cocaine because it's more concentrated and it was easier to transport. And yeah, so all the penalties for crack cocaine are worse, even though powder cocaine is, I think it's actually more addictive. Than crack. Or no, it's
slightly more addictive.
It's like
somewhat. It's also more concentrated.
Oh, it's more deadly or something. I don't know. I remember.
And also, I think that not only does that put more black people in prison and like
disproportionately,
it also I think it also encourages the enforcers of the law to be racist as they're enforcing it.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I just had a historical note. People think the drug war is a recent thing, but if you look back at it, in American history, actually the drug war has been happening since the beginning of this country. There was a rebellion in like 1793 called the Whiskey Rebellion, and it was about an excise tax they wanted to put on whiskey, and farmers out in like western Pennsylvania, and George Washington himself actually went out and commanded a force of 6,000, and they basically brutally suppressed this rebellion that was against taxation. But I just wanted to add that I don't think it's necessarily because of racism. I think maybe that helped like set it, you know, for sure, but I think it's more about greed and making money and enslaving people and making money off of them because like my English friend has told me, like they even made money off the Holocaust.
I mean, I'm somewhat of a believer in the power, what is it, the power theory of sociology or whatever, where it's like disempowered groups, the ones that get screwed over by law, which is part of the reason I'm an anarchist. Like, the opium, all the opium crap was because Asian people did opium, and they actually closed the opium dens before they made opium illegal. And it was about the right to association, and they didn't want them to, you know, come up and like have like unionize or something. I don't know. But I mean, most of them are like, I'm pretty convinced that they're mostly racially based, and I think that it has to do with the fact that like in the past, white men have been in power. So I think it's confounding, but.
Won't the children start doing heroin?
And obviously, if we legalize everything, the kids are just gonna start doing
that's a popular argument. Like, if we legalize drugs, won't everyone start doing drugs? Okay.
Because we all want to do
heroin. That has a faulty premise because,
well, yeah, in Portugal.
Oh, okay. I know. I was just gonna say, like, in general, no matter if drugs are legal or illegal, people are gonna do drugs. And like, just the fact that they're illegal and so easily attainable, like on the black market and stuff, just makes people, like, I think that people, do more drugs when it's illegal than, let's say, that they would maybe when it's legal. Like,
well, in Portugal, like, that's empirically proven. Like, the drug rates have gone down, and because they focus on rehabilitation, people are better off. And frankly, when drugs aren't criminalized, they're pure. Because they don't go through these like back alley ways.
Sketchy, like.
Exactly, and it's like that's why people die, because things are cut with other drugs, and it's like the concentrations are different. And people are scared to report, like, to get help for it because they're like, oh, well, I'm doing something that's a criminal activity, like I could be locked up, as opposed to getting help, and it's like, frankly, I'd much rather like meth head mothers to get help than like, their kids get screwed over because.
Yeah, because if it was legal, we could have like private organizations, putting these people through like rehab that's actually, like working. Here, 1 second. I was just gonna say, like I was watching this movie, this documentary. Maybe some of y'all have seen it, The Union, right? And it was just talking about how there's like this statistic out there that like, like the majority of the people that have been in rehab are there for pot, right? And that's just that's the statistic that they say. What they don't say though is that like 97% of the people that have been to like a help facility for marijuana is simply because it was court ordered. They're like, you're either going to jail or you're going to rehab. Like, that's your choice. And so they all go to rehab, and so then the government just flaunts this, this statistic like, oh look, everyone is like getting put in rehab for marijuana because it's so bad.
They also say it's a gateway drug, and it's like, I'd also say that 99% of drug users drank alcohol before they did any drugs. It's definitely a higher statistic than smoked pot. And frankly, alcohol kills way more. It kills a third of the people that are killed by smoking, tobacco, and tobacco is literally carcinogenous. So, but that's legal, and it's okay, because you can tax it.
Double standard. Oh, Makun, you were going to say?
I think you guys actually just covered a lot of stuff I wanted to say, but I also think that, kind of adding on to what Caitlin was saying about alcohol being more dangerous, that and the whole gateway drug thing. I think the reason that, the arguments for the gateway drug thing always use correlation. They say, like, after you smoke marijuana, you're going to smoke these things. But I think the reason that's the case is because they're illegal, and like, I'm not sure which one you're talking about, because they're more illegal, it's always like the back alley kind of thing, and it's impure, and you get involved in like drug gangs and stuff. And so because of that, you kind of get sucked into the atmosphere of doing those more dangerous drugs. I think if it was all legal and it was more open. Yeah,
like,
and that's the other thing. All of the drug trafficking across the border, all of the drug wars, and the people that we have on the border getting killed, I think all of that would go away if this stuff was legal.
Right.
Yeah, no, it totally would.
Mark, I read an article a while back. Mark Thornton was arguing that the rise of meth can be linked to a greater crackdown on cocaine. So people were looking for a cheaper and more potent drug because they couldn't get there.
Yeah,
cocaine
well, it's kind of like, I was gonna compare that, like how like a while ago, like they all had like, the fake weed, with like the chemical spray or whatever, and like as soon as they banned that like version, they made they altered the chemicals and made like a different one that's probably like way worse for you. Like it's kind of like the same with like, the meth and like.
Yeah. Well, people didn't used to die from MDMA because MDMA used to be pure, and they used to pass it out at Dallas nightclubs. And the biggest problem that cops have with it, the reason it got illegal so quickly, was because old people were doing it. They were getting over like PTSD, and when they asked people if they regretted it, they were like, no, I probably wouldn't do it again, but I didn't regret it. It was a great experience, and I feel like I benefited from it. And these were like 60-year-old women, so like the government was like, well, crap, like these aren't people who we can really like villainize. And so they made it illegal within the span of like 2 years.
Just one last quick point. I just wanted to say that the government says they're banning these substances because it's for your own health, it's for your own good. Yet in 1996, the Congress passed a law to make it where you could advertise pharmaceuticals on television. So they basically given the pharmaceutical companies, who are the biggest drug criminals, all this power to do whatever they want and mess up people's lives with all these Xanaxes, all these synthetic drugs, which is much worse for you than marijuana.
And a lot more addictive too.
Exactly. Well, I mean, like they came out with a male contraceptive, which they use in Brazil and China, and it's extremely effective, and it's like extremely simple. It's natural, and they discovered it because they fed bulls this medication, and they were having a lot of sex with all the cows, but there were no calves happening. And this was actually like blocked by the feminists in the 1960s, but the pharmaceutical companies wouldn't push it because it was made out of like some kind of corn derivative, and so they couldn't really profit off of it because it was so easy to make. So yeah, it's extremely cheap and it's a male contraceptive, but the feminists were like, we fought for the control over our reproductive rights, so you can't.
All right. And moving on from